Hey everybody, welcome back to Game Time. John Eads here, back with you. We got a big week of content. It's LSU Alabama week, so probably the biggest week of the season for football. So a lot of content coming your way. If you're new, be sure to give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe on YouTube here. You can find all of our previous episodes on our YouTube playlist. We've been going for a couple months now, so a lot of content, and we're going to continue that into women's basketball, men's basketball season, and of course into baseball once the spring rolls around. So just getting started, but welcome if you are new. We post on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons covering LSU, the Saints, Southern, Tulane, and we're covering a lot of those things here today. We got 3 topics on LSU because, again, it's LSU Bama week. Don't need to say anything more. You guys know how important that is. Talking a lot of defense today because there was some news that came out of Brian Kelly's press conference yesterday that sparked some red flags for me with this game, so we're going to talk about that. And then the Southern Jaguars had an instant classic game against Texas Southern on Saturday, so we'll talk about that game and where they're sitting in the SWAC standings because they got a chance to play for the SWAC Championship if they keep the wins coming. So again, like and subscribe. Excited for today's episode. Let's get into it. So we'll start with LSU, and I want to go from a bird's eye perspective and slowly get our way down to the field and talk about what's going to happen on said field. So coming into this game, right, LSU's coming off a bye week, as is Alabama, and the teams are in kind of similar situations. With LSU, it's, all right, this team didn't start the season very well, but they've got a lot of potential. They've had a lot of talent since the beginning of the season. Can they salvage the season? Because LSU was a very trendy pick to win the SEC this year, or at least to win the SEC West. I know I picked them to win the SEC West, and after you lose to Florida State, which we predicted and expected, we were still on board with that. Like, hey, they're going to win out. They'll take care of business. They got to beat Alabama. They got to pull some wins here and there. But then they lost to Ole Miss, right? And when that happened, I was very concerned with my prediction because I didn't think they'd lose that game before the season, and certainly not during the season. And they didn't look like the LSU team I thought we would see. But since then, they've turned it around. They beat Missouri right after, got a ranked win. Then they took care of Auburn easily. Not a great Auburn team, but still beat them by 30 points. That's pretty impressive, especially in an SEC game like that. And then, of course, they beat Army. That was expected. And now we're at the bye week. So we're all wondering, is the team really different from the one that we saw lose in a shootout in Oxford? Have they finally found who they're supposed to be? Are they finally that team we thought they were before the season started? On the other side with Alabama, they're 7-1. They've lost one game this year. It was to Texas, a team that has played some great ball, is certainly in the national championship picture, even with Quinn Ewers out with injury. And not many teams in the past decade have gone to Tuscaloosa and won in Bryant-Denny Stadium. And Steve Sarkisian in Texas did that. But since then, Alabama has turned it around, and they haven't won games in a very beautiful manner. But as Nick Saban does in the years where the team's not necessarily dominant, doesn't have a Heisman Trophy player on the offense, whatever, they've just found ways to win games. So they beat Arkansas by 3. They come back and beat Tennessee in the second half in a game that was very difficult to watch, to be honest with you, watching that film back. And there's been other games this year where Alabama's just had to, like Texas A&M, just make enough plays and just literally scrap together a mix of something in a pot to come out with a win. That's how it's been. So is this Alabama team elite? I don't think you're going to get that answer coming out of this game, but it'll at least give you an indication of, okay, perhaps they can be. And down the stretch of the season, perhaps they could be a team that beats Georgia. So the point is both teams come into this game with a lot to prove. And for LSU, if they win this game, to me, they salvage this season. Because before this, assuming they get the win, it's looking like a failure. Because you brought back Jaden Daniels, you brought back, how many starters they bring back? 8 on offense, 7 on defense. And that probably doesn't include guys that have made spot starts here and there that have starting experience, right? And to have 2 losses before we even got into October, that was embarrassing. Because, again, this was a team that a lot of people picked to win the SEC West and maybe compete for a national championship. And you lose 2 games before the rankings for the college football playoff even come out. I mean, that can't happen, right? But they're right back in the discussion. They're in the top 15 in the rankings. The college football playoff rankings come out tonight, if I'm not mistaken, and I assume LSU will be around 15, maybe a little bit higher or lower from there. And if they win this game at Alabama, you're basically in sole possession of first place in the SEC West. I know Ole Miss has the tiebreaker, but they still have to play Georgia. And if Georgia plays anything like they did this past weekend against Florida, like they do against Ole Miss, they'll win that game. And then you have sole possession of first in the SEC West. So what I'm saying is, you go to Tuscaloosa, you win this game, everything that I thought you could accomplish before the season and all the stuff that the fans hope to see this season is still possible. Because if you win your games from there, Florida, Georgia State, Texas A&M, you go to the SEC Championship game. And if you win the SEC, you're in the playoff. Even if you make it to the championship game and you lose, that's now 2 straight years. You've beaten Alabama, won the West, and have gone to the SEC Championship. And it's the first 2 years of a new regime under Brian Kelly. That's very impressive to me. And to be honest with you, LSU might be the team with the best chance to beat Georgia in the entire SEC. They've got the great offense, and that's really what you need to keep up with Georgia. Like Ohio State almost knocked off the Bulldogs in the college football playoff last year because they have an offense comparable to what LSU and Jaden Daniels have put together this year. So, again, if I could sum up everything I just said in one sentence, if LSU goes to Tuscaloosa and knocks off Alabama, takes sole control of the SEC West, the season is salvaged. And if you're an LSU fan, I want you to let me know if they get this win. Are you back to being happy? Are you, okay, I'm content with what they've accomplished this season, with everything else out the rearview mirror? If LSU goes to Alabama and wins, are you satisfied as an LSU fan? I want to know. Personally, as a person that covers the team, I am. So let's see if it happens. So, if LSU is to go to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama, they'll need some guys to step up because on Monday, Brian Kelly says in the middle of the press conference, like we were a good 12, 13 minutes into this media session before somebody asked Brian Kelly, hey, so what's the deal with the injuries? And then he says, oh, yeah, Mekhi Wingo is going to be out for the season, or at least for 6 weeks. That's a big deal. Like, that's a huge deal. This guy was an All-American, All-SEC player coming into the season. And the way it was presented was as if he's kind of an afterthought nobody, which is just wild to me because Mekhi Wingo is a huge part of this defense. He's a huge part of the defensive line. And it's a shame because the injury comes right before your biggest game of the season and you want to be at full strength. You'd obviously want to have an All-American on the field for a top 15 game. I mean, that's just obvious, right? But it looks like they're not going to have him because Wingo has surgery. There's a chance he could play, maybe deep into the postseason. 6 weeks is what, about 2 months? So it's possible, unlikely though. And even if he plays, what are you going to get out of him, right? So that's a bummer. Hard to replace a guy like that, especially on a defense that we've talked about all season has some pretty, big problems, mostly on the back end, not necessarily in the front end. But it's not good. Luckily though, LSU recruited the transfer portal very well, and they've got guys that can step up, step in, and try to replace or maybe try to play at the same level to what Wingo had done this season. And he hadn't been putting up All-American numbers. Nobody on the defensive line has really put up big stats, right? Like 5 sacks, 50 tackles, 6 TFLs. Nobody's really done that because of the nature of what this defense is. It's a defense that doesn't have a great secondary. And it's hard for defensive linemen to make a difference when teams pass the ball a lot, when they can just kind of get the ball out quickly. There's no chances for sacks and whatnot. So who can replace and step in for Mekhi Wingo? I think the first guy we got to talk about is Jordan Jefferson, the West Virginia transfer, not the former LSU quarterback. This guy's been really good this year, and he's really flown under the radar because he's been playing behind Mason Smith. He's been playing behind Mekhi Wingo. But here's a stat you probably didn't know. Who leads the LSU defense in tackles for loss, the defensive line? It's not Mekhi Wingo. It's not Mason Smith. It's Jordan Jefferson from West Virginia. That's who leads the defensive line in CFL. He's got 4.5 on the year, 21 tackles and a sack. And he's a rotational guy. He will come in from Mekhi Wingo. He'll come in on the heavy sets where LSU maybe has 3 bigger linemen and 1 defensive end, and then maybe Harold Perkins is on the edge too. They've got guys in that room. And a guy like Jordan Jefferson is tailor-made to step in and do what Mekhi Wingo has done this season. Be a player that can get pressure from that D-tackle position. Be a player that will feast and stop run plays, will stuff gaps and help the linebackers out. So they're good. It's a tough loss losing a guy like Wingo because now, the guy that would come in for him has to play, and then when Jordan Jefferson needs a break, you got to bring somebody else in like Jacoby and Guillory or a younger player that maybe isn't ready for that kind of a workload, but they're going to have to be ready because there's no choice. You got to run somebody out there to stop the run and get pressure on Jalen Milroe. So, as I said, Jacoby and Guillory could be another player that steps in. He's very experienced. He's played at LSU for a couple of years, has been a rotational guy at times this year. So you've certainly got pieces to use. And I got to say, this defensive end room has been really good this year, in my opinion. Like, again, not putting up crazy stats, but when you watch the film, they're consistently affecting opposing quarterbacks, forcing them to move around in the pocket, forcing them to get rid of the football. Guys like Braden Swinson, the Oregon transfer, has been solid off the edge, getting pressure, and Paris Shan has been a disruptor for the same reasons, but he also has a knack for swatting passes down and stuff like that. So you're not dead if you're the defensive line without Wingo. You've got pieces both inside and outside, and you can still get pressure on this Alabama offensive line. It helps that you still got Mason Smith because people are like, oh, why isn't Mason Smith producing? Well, it's because he gets double-teamed every play. He's playing basically nose tackle for this defense, and he still finds a way to make plays. He will in this game, too. And one thing that's very important to keep in mind, even with Wingo out, this Alabama offensive line is Swiss cheese. Like, they cannot pass protect for the life of them. They are one of the worst pass-protecting offensive lines in the country. 126th, tied with Northwestern, out of 132 FBS teams or whatever the number is. So that's really going to help out your defensive line. It's really going to help out the cornerbacks as well in LSU's secondary. If you can get pressure and affect Jalen Milroe, affect this passing game, if you can consistently get men in that backfield and get some sacks. So the point here is, no Wingo, not no problem, but it's not that big of a problem because you have pieces to use. You've got a solid defensive line. What they have to do now is prove that stat about Alabama's offensive line, about Alabama's pass protection to be true and get after Jalen Milroe. All right, so I just mentioned those corners. I want to go deeper into LSU's cornerback situation. Not looking too good. The situation is pretty dire right now for LSU's cornerbacks. Brian Kelly on Monday saying that Deuce Chestnut, Denver Harris, and Zy Alexander all unavailable on Saturday against Alabama. And Deuce, Zy, those were your opening day starters at corner. Deuce hasn't played in a long time. I couldn't even tell you the last time that Chestnut played in a game for this team. Probably like Mississippi State, Grambling State. It was a long time ago. We haven't seen him since. Denver Harris has been in and out of the lineup, but he's had to play a lot more because Deuce hasn't been suiting up. And then Zy Alexander's kind of been the one mainstay all year in that cornerback room. He's out with an injury, apparently. So what does that leave you with? Well, not many proven options. You got LaTerrence Welsh, young kid. You've got Ashton Stamps, a true freshman. You got Sage Ryan, an experienced guy that has kind of had to fill in at corner because of really there's nobody there that can play at this point. So not looking great. And the one time that we saw a shorthanded secondary room against an offense that passed the ball well, not Auburn, not Army. Ole Miss, though, didn't look good. Same thing for Missouri, too. I know LSU won that game, but they still put up 39 points and still had a lot of downfield shots completed, passing plays all over the field. So, I understand if you're not feeling too confident in this LSU secondary going into this game against Alabama. But that's the big question. How much has this Alabama secondary, or not Alabama secondary, how much has this LSU secondary improved since the debacle against Ole Miss? Because that was a debacle. You had players not knowing if it was man-to-man, not knowing if it was zone. Guys were missing tackles. Dudes weren't putting in their 100% effort on plays. How much better are they 1 month from that terrible showing? We're going to find out against Alabama. And it's important because the Crimson Tide don't have a good offense. I'll just be frank with you. It's 77th in FBS in passing, For scoring numbers, they're down in, at least below 60. I've looked all this stuff up. Nothing really sticks off the page. What does stick off the page, though, is this deep dive stat right here. And this is one that really matters. Yards per completion, while Alabama is 77th in college football in passing offense, they are 4th in yards per completion, one in front of LSU, who's at 5th. They complete their passes for, on average, 15.54 yards per completion, which means this Alabama offense likes to throw it deep, and when they do throw it deep, they complete those deep passes. That's what you got to know about Jalen Milroe in this offense. They're not really a team that'll carve you up with the 10 to 20-yard passes over the middle to the outside. No, they like to run the ball, set up play action, and then launch it and catch these corners, catch these safeties in one-on-one, in a mismatch, or really just sleeping. That's what they're trying to do. And when you're playing a young secondary, guys that haven't seen a lot of snaps at the SEC level, yeah, I mean, that's not good, because they could easily get caught looking in the backfield. They could easily get caught looking at the quarterback. They could just simply get beat on a double move. And if those kinds of things happen in this game, that might be all you need if you're Alabama to beat LSU. So you can't sit there as an LSU fan and go, they're fine, next man up. No, I mean, this is not good here. This is a clear mismatch that you could see on paper coming into the game. So, again, back to the question. How much better is this LSU secondary since the loss against Ole Miss? Because the same things that the Rebels exposed this Tigers secondary with, Alabama will do. Jalen Milroe will hit a receiver one-on-one if he's open downfield. And the question and the challenge for these young secondary members is to do assignments, play fundamental football, and don't give up that big play. And we'll see if they can do that. That's the one thing that's giving me pause with predicting this matchup right now. I mean, who do you go with here? Alabama doesn't have a great offense, but all it takes is a couple of mistakes by young players, which young players are prone to make mistakes, to flip this game on its head and to allow Alabama to stay in this game and keep up with LSU's very potent offense. So that's the challenge for those younger guys that are now having to step in and play. Again, just like the Mekhi Wingo injury, it's just a darn shame that you brought in 3 transfer corners to play and play big snaps and in the big games like this one, and they're unavailable and can't play. So that's the one part of this game to me where Alabama has a decided advantage on paper, is their downfield passing game against LSU's young, inexperienced, and frankly, somewhat porous secondary. So that's one matchup to watch within this matchup on Saturday, and that could be the Achilles heel for this LSU team in this game, should they lose. All right, let's finish up this episode with some Southern talk, because the similarities between LSU and Southern right now are really interesting. Both teams competing for first in their respective divisions, the SEC West for LSU and the SWAC West for Southern. Right now, the Jags 4-1 in SWAC play. Just got a huge win against Texas Southern, and they're traveling to Alcorn State next weekend with a chance to take possession of first place in that SWAC West. And if they win against Alcorn State, I bet you they win the whole division, because the rest of their schedule isn't really too difficult. And meanwhile, Alcorn State still has to play Jackson State, one of the best teams in the SWAC East. So, again, on Saturday, if you missed it, we got coverage on our YouTube page here by Kevin Batiste, and we did some other stuff as well covering the game. They were down and out, really. It was 17-7, and then Southern got a fumble, scoop and score, which kind of kept them back in the game there. And then with 8 seconds left, their kicker, Joshua Griffin, made a 54-yard field goal with 8 seconds left, the longest kick of his career. Just unreal, where he just pulled that out of nowhere, basically. And then Texas Southern's kicker misses a chip shot field goal in overtime. And then Kendrick Rhymes, an emerging superstar for this Jaguars football team, ran in a touchdown from 16 yards out to walk off and win it for Southern. I mean, it was awesome, and Rhymes is really stepping up big. I'll talk about him more in a few minutes here. So that was a big W against a team you probably should have beat more decidedly, but, it's college football. Any given day, any given team can beat any other given team, right? So that puts you in a tie with Alcorn State at the top of the West. SU's lone conference loss was to Alabama State way back in like week 1. I think that's who they opened with. They've also lost to Florida A&M and Jackson State. So I understand if you're confused, why is Southern 4-1 and not 4-3? Because those are both SWAC teams. I guess they counted both of those games as non-conference. So that helps because that's why you're 4-1. That's why you're in the top of the West with Alcorn State. So the game next weekend against the Braves is huge. Again, the winner takes sole possession of that division, and the games left for Southern are as such: Prairie View, A&M, and Grambling State in the Bayou Classic. And then what Alcorn State has, I already mentioned it, they've still got Jackson State, a team that beat Southern by 2 touchdowns, and they've still got Texas Southern as well, a team that competed well against Southern, as I just explained to you. So those are losable games right there. So I'm thinking if Southern wins this game against Alcorn State, it's all gas, no brakes to the finish line. And you go back to the SWAC Championship game where you lost last year to Deion Sanders and Jackson State. Maybe you get a rematch with Florida A&M, a team that you played very tough here at home and only lost by a touchdown. I'd love to see that rematch. So how has Southern kind of turned it around? Harold Blood and that passing game haven't been great. I had Kevin Batiste on the show a few weeks ago, and we talked about this. He's Southern's quarterback. Just hasn't been working. He's been struggling to get to 200 passing yards a game, and in the year 2023, you can't really do that as a college football team. But while he struggled, that running game has been massive, especially the last 2 weeks. Remember that name I mentioned off the top, Kendrick Rhymes. Back-to-back 100-yard games, went off against Bethune-Cookman last week, and then he poured in, what did he get? What did he finish with? I think it was like 120-some-odd yards against Texas Southern. None more important than the 16 he gathered in overtime with that game-winning touchdown run. He's really come out of nowhere, and in the last 2 weeks put up like almost all of his production for the season. And if he keeps running like that, he's going to run this team right to that SWAC championship game, right? Now, as far as this Alcorn State game goes, it should be very evenly matched. They love to run the ball. They've got a solid defense, a solid offense. Southern and Alcorn are like neck and neck in the SWAC standings for like total offense, total defense. Like Alcorn's 5, Southern 6, or Southern 6 and Alcorn's 5. So this is going to be a really close game. Some notes that I gathered on this one. The home team has won 5 straight in this series. Alcorn State's the home team this year, so keep that in mind. And then Southern hasn't won at Alcorn State. The game's been played in a couple different areas, but on the road at Alcorn, Southern hasn't won since 2016. So if you want to pick based on trends, you'd probably side with Alcorn State here. But Kevin Batiste's going to be there. It's going to be a great game. It's probably going to come down to the wire, maybe like this Texas Southern game. Both teams got some good pieces. And again, the winner in the driver's seat, in pole position for that SWAC West Championship. So let's see what Southern can do on Saturday at Alcorn. It's going to be a great game. You should tune in. If nothing else, tune in to our show where we break it down on Saturday, both the LSU-Alabama game and this game. We'll have plenty of great coverage. And I'll give you a pick later in the week. I'll tell you who I think is going to win the game. So check back in with us on Thursday. On Saturday, make sure you have that game on TV. It's going to be awesome. All right, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Much appreciated. We'll have more coverage on Thursday, previewing the Southern and LSU games. Again, be sure to like and subscribe before you go. Check out our previous episodes. We did some LSU-Alabama preview content last week, and we got more exciting content coming up with women's basketball coming back, men's basketball. So this is the place to be if you're a fan of the Saints, Tulane, Southern, LSU, obviously, right here. So appreciate you guys watching again. Catch you on Thursday. Take care. Until then.